I'm live. We're just going to try out a demo real quick. We're going to show off vCluster platform. If you're here, welcome. This is probably going to be a video you can watch later. So this is going to be similar to the videos that I'm actually doing weekly on our weekly demo. So I'm just going to show off the vCluster platform. This is version 4.01. 4.01. Yeah, so basically with the newest version 4.0 update. But welcome in, and if you're watching this after it's already been recorded, let me know what you think. Let me know if you want to see other things and other demo stuff that I can show off. But for the most part, this is going to be pretty basic, and I'm just going to show off the different parts of vCluster platform and what you can do with it and how you can use it, and then show you where the docs are and give you some other maybe helpful hints and stuff like that. Kind of show you some stuff on the command line. But welcome into the live stream, just kind of hanging out. If you have questions, I've got question stuff up. You can ask questions. Let me know if you want to know about something that I haven't shown off. But this is vCluster platform, right? So this is what the UI looks like. Basically, once you start out over here in the vCluster docs, you're going to be able to install vCluster platform. And basically, this is what it's going to look like, right? You're going to do brew install to install the vCluster CLI, and then you're going to vCluster platform start, and you're going to end up with one of these URLs like this. So you'll be able to access it remote. You can install it on bare metal, or you can install it on-prem, you can install it in the cloud, you can install it in all kinds of places. Usually for our demo, we start out with some slides, but I'm just going to show off the UI and kind of hang out. Like I said, you got any questions? Let me know. I'm here to answer questions. Here to hang out. So yeah, let me know if you got any questions. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So the idea behind projects is that that's basically like the tenant of vCluster platform. So this is the tenant. Everything in vCluster platform, which is kind of like the pro enterprise version of vCluster OSS, is going to be our CRD. So vCluster OSS is going to use the vCluster YAML and Helm and other ways to deploy. It's basically Helm charts. You think of it as an application, whereas the platform is CRD driven. So you can still use a lot of the stuff that you used previously on OSS. Like if you've got a vCluster YAML all configured and set up, you're still going to be able to use that. You can just bring it over and get started that way. I'd say if you want to start out with vCluster OSS, get your virtual clusters running, get your applications running in vCluster, make sure everything's working, get ingress working, play around, see what CRDs you want to expose to the virtual clusters. And then once you've got that running, what you can do is hop into vCluster platform and do a POC, give other users access, and kind of show off what you can do with it. Like I said, start out with OSS, the same image you're going to be using for OSS as the pro platform version. So you can bring whatever you're doing on the OSS version over and use it here. Anyways, projects, right? So projects are going to give you a way to configure tenants within vCluster platform. Think of this as your teams or projects. Basically, it's called project because think of a project you're working on. Maybe you're working on a CNCF project, maybe Knative or something like that. It could be this, right? So you can add members, you can do templates. So we're gonna start out with tenants, projects. We're gonna start out with tenants. So, and then we'll go in and we'll talk about how you deploy a virtual cluster and how it's different, and some of the benefits of actually using the vCluster platform over the open source model. So you can add users and teams, right? You can give them different roles. You can have an admin, you can have a viewer, you can have an user, maybe your viewers, your billing team or something like that wants to just log in and see what people are using, because you can set up quotas. They can help kind of figure out how much you should charge that group based on how much of the quota they're using, or set up a quota as a way to charge someone. Say, you've got 10, 10, 10 or something. And then if you hit that, we can upgrade your quota and you can pay more. Otherwise, maybe you want to use less of a quota, but use that for billing. Use it for anything you want pretty much. Templates. So templates are going to be the way that you actually deploy a virtual cluster within the vCluster platform. Right now, what you can do is you can give access to the project to different templates. So you can configure a bunch of templates, which we'll go look at the templates here in a minute. You can give access to these different templates. Maybe there's a team that you want to have a specific template that they can only use, or a team that requires a specialized template that has certain things installed when they run their virtual cluster as well. This is a way that you can give them access to that, or restrict them, right? So you can give them access to all of the templates or restrict them to specific templates. Clusters, right? So this right now is running on a Kubernetes cluster that I have down in my basement. But say you're running this, the cloud or something like that. Well, you're probably not going to want to run workloads maybe where vCluster platform is running. You're going to want to connect different clusters. So with this, you can connect other clusters outside of here. So say you've got an EKS cluster or multiple EKS clusters, you can connect them in, and they can give users access to those clusters. And the cool thing about quotas is that the quota will work across all of those clusters. So say you want to set up a quota for virtual cluster instances, right? Say you want to have virtual cluster instances active of this split of 2. Say you've got like a single user and they just need 2 virtual clusters. On 2 different projects. Well, you can restrict them to running only 2 virtual clusters at a time. Maybe they want to template out more than 2 because they're, maybe they want to template out different versions of things that are running different CRDs. You can give them access to template out 5, right? So the difference between active and just virtual cluster instances is that active are going to be ones that are actively running. Virtual cluster instances are templates. So, using sleep mode and stuff like that, you're going to be able to actually kind of, give a team maybe, they can run 10 virtual clusters and then they have sleep mode active. So if they have users in, the EU and the US, they can kind of play the game of, these people are working at this given time and these people are working at this other given time. And we're only going to run our instances when we're working on it. And then they go to sleep once we stop working. So you can kind of restrict how many workloads are actually running. And then you can use the sleep mode to use less when they're not actually being used. All right, so quotas, like we've got 2 of them running here. You can see them here in the UI. You can drill down and actually add quotas for Kubernetes, different types too, like CPU, memory, basically all the built-ins, and you can limit to how much they're actually able to use that way. You can do it per project or per user and per team. Now, integrations, right? So Argo CD is one of the integrations that we have. What you can do here is you can add the Argo CD instance to vCluster platform, and then when a user creates a virtual cluster, you can have it either automatically add it to Argo CD, or you can let them have a little toggle to where they'll add it to Argo CD, and then it becomes a target for where they can actually deploy stuff. And I'll show that off once I actually deploy a cluster. I'll add it into Argo CD and show you how easy that is, right? You can also add SSO, right? So if you have your users coming into vCluster platform, they can just come through here and use SSO and get into the Argo CD instance. So right now I'm just running this locally, Argo CD or argo.vcluster-demo local. This is all running locally on a K3s cluster I'm running. I'll show you that too in a few minutes. And then we also have Rancher. So I don't have the Rancher integration installed on this. It's a little more complicated to set up. Not too hard. We have a video on actually how to do it. Just need to have Rancher running. I don't have Rancher running currently. But with the Rancher integration, what you can do is add Rancher to this. So if you say enable, like you can show the connection information. You just give it some information about Rancher. It'll connect in. It'll add a little button in Rancher that you can click, and you'll be able to come over to the vCluster platform and create a virtual cluster, and then it'll automatically add it into Rancher too. So say your users are on Rancher nonstop and they don't want to actually access another UI and live there. They can live in Rancher. They can come over here. They can create their virtual cluster. It'll add it over there, and they can manage it like a regular cluster, which is pretty cool. And then Vault 2, you can enable HashiCorp Vault and get all that configured and set up as well. And if you notice, whenever I turn on something over here, it adds over here to the CRD. So you can template out a bunch of stuff. So like Vault goes from false to true. You can use the wizard to figure out how you want to configure stuff. And then once you're done with that, these are all CRDs. So you can just create these on the command line or use your different tools to automatically create these when you onboard a new project, tenant, and all that stuff. Or if you have like a template that you want to modify or update, like you want to update it without going into the UI, you can do all that too, right? It's all CRD. All the stuff's installed on the cluster. So let me go over to the CLI and I can kind of show you that. So if we get CRDs and then we grab Loft, you can see you got virtual cluster templates, instances, users, teams, tasks, like all these things. Like I said, they're all CRDs. Makes it super simple if you're using like GitHub or something like that, and you want to do actions whenever you have like a PR or something like that come in and build a new virtual cluster and set you up a preview environment, right? It's pretty cool. All right, let's go back over here. Let me spill water. All right, so I kind of showed off projects. Projects are basically tenants, right? But once you've got that all set up and you've got your users added in and you've got your quotas and all that stuff configured, what you want to do is you probably want to create a virtual cluster, right? I want to create a virtual cluster. Like that's the whole reason I've got this installed. So before we get to that, we're going to go over and we're going to talk about some of the basics behind that. They're a little bit different than the OSS version. So we've got templates, right? So if you look at one of these templates, it's already configured. You can go over here and you can make configurations to it. This is basically the same kind of stuff that you're going to see in the vCluster YAML. So if you're used to the docs, you're used to the vCluster YAML, this stuff is going to be the same. And if you notice over here, it actually shows up in the value section. CRD2, right? This is a virtual cluster template. So you can use the wizard to set all this up, and then you can go in and you can modify all this stuff in a YAML configuration and then apply it and then do all the cool stuff that way in case you don't want to actually go through the UI all the time. All right, so what's in a virtual cluster or vCluster template? So you can select the version. So like say you've got a specific version that you want to use of vCluster. Right now I'm using 0.20.1. Maybe I want to use an older version or a new version because I want to test something. I can do that here. And then I can, that's basically going to give you different versions of like Kubernetes and stuff like that. If you want to use a different version, you can actually also specify that stuff too. But you can also set up sleep mode. So this is part of the platform stuff that's outside of the OSS. What's sleep mode good for? It's going to save you money. It's going to automatically delete stuff if you want to, right? You can auto delete stuff if things have been set up and then just never used. User says, hey, I want a virtual cluster, or I want a Kubernetes cluster. And you're like, okay, cool. Here's a Kubernetes cluster. But then they never use it, or they use it for like an hour and they're like, that was cool. I don't really need this right now. Or they don't need it for like a couple of weeks after they've requested it because maybe they're working on a project that they just needed the cluster as like a starter, and then they need to sit there and read documentation and actually get it set up to develop before they start using it. Well, this will put it to sleep, right? So it's gonna reduce all of the stuff that's running for the virtual cluster down to 0. So it's a scale of 0, and it's not gonna run until something actually accesses it again. Or like one of the only caveats here is like, say you're using Argo CD or something like that, and you've connected the cluster to it. Argo CD is going to keep on hitting this and say, hey, it's stuff running, and it's going to keep hitting the API, and it'll keep the cluster up. Well, there are ways to actually go ahead and ignore that if you want to. So you can say, Argo CD, just ignore that, and it'll go down, right? That's if you set up Argo CD for it, right? Like you're probably not going to set up Argo CD for just a developer that's just, deploying like a couple of things on a cluster and they want to test stuff out. But anyways, so you can, say sleep after, 360 minutes, or you can say after 60 minutes of inactivity, right? And it's going to configure this over here in your values, which is going to be similar, like I said, to the vCluster YAML. And then it'll apply that. So basically, after we've created the cluster, let's say like if it's been active for like 10 minutes, I mean, that might 10 minutes might be a little bit annoying for the user, but you could always, just go 10 minutes or something like that, and then make sure that you're always scaling those things down. All right, then you've got the vCluster YAML, so control plane, sync, external. This is the platform auto sleep. Control plane, that's going to be configuration values that are similar to vCluster YAML, which is going to be over here in the docs. So if we look at the docs over here, like all these configuration options and stuff can go in there if you want to get advanced with the templating and stuff of that, like you want to sync certain resources beyond ingress or other things like that. All right, and then if we go to objects, right, like you can configure the virtual cluster to come up with specific objects when it's created. If you've got any needs for that, you can also add applications. So say you want every one of these to come up with a application that's relevant to your group, or you want to just install Argo CD on everything, JS policy, Ingress Nginx, any of these things, you can install them when the virtual cluster comes up. You can give parameters, you can give different options to the user. So when they're actually creating this from the template, they can select different options, and maybe you give, option A if they want to do this thing, or option B if they want to do that thing. It'll configure based on that. Permission. So basically this is just, access rules for this instance. Not much there to say, just, you can say who's able to actually, modify it or interact with it. Advanced options. So here you can add labels, annotations, objects, apps, and then you can go down to, ingress authentication, ingress access. You can add all of these things if you need to. Like say you want to automatically add it to Argo CD once it's been created, you can do that too with the integration that we already have over there. So basically what it'll do is it'll look for Argo CD, it'll add it in, which that can be super helpful. Like if you're automating some of this stuff and you want it to just show up in Argo CD after it's been created. Like say you're doing like a preview environment, or you've got a pull request that you just want to bring up and test. Great for that, right? And then template permissions, just who can view and modify the values of the form fields, basically different permissions for it. So this is what backs the virtual clusters that you're creating in the vCluster platform, right? Like instead of using a Helm chart with YAML and stuff like that, you're going to be using this. All right, so let's get rid of let's close and get rid of that. I'm not going to modify the sleep time. All right, now clusters, right? Clusters, like I was saying previously, you can add multiple clusters. So what I'm running right now, this is just on a 3-node virtual machine K3s cluster running down in my basement. But this is where you would actually add, your EKS, your on-prem, your different Kubernetes clusters that you're running that you want to give access to users, right? Like, so you're giving them EKS access. They don't need to auth to that EKS cluster. You're just giving them access to it to create a virtual cluster on it, right? So you're going to need to be admin on those clusters. You're going to make sure that you have access to actually be able to create things within it, right? And then you're just going to connect to host cluster. And there's a couple of different ways to connect it, right? So once you have that connected, you can give users access with the project settings. So if we go back up to the settings up here in the project, this is where you're actually going to, make those changes, and you can specify specific clusters, right? Right now I just have local cluster, but for this project, they have access to all clusters. Pretty good too. Like say you've got clusters in specific regions that you want users to access, then you can limit them to that. All right, now let's go ahead and create a virtual cluster. So I'm going to create a virtual cluster. There's a brand new wizard that comes up. You can do it without a template, and you can modify stuff there, or you can use a template that you have configured. So let's use the one that I was just showing off a minute ago, just the vCluster Pro template with the sleep mode. And then I'm just going to create. I'm not going to actually make any changes over here to automatically add it to Argo CD because I want to show that off when I do that toggle in a moment. All right, anyone have any questions? Yeah, let me know. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll answer them, or post questions in the comments if you're watching this after the live stream, and I'll try to answer everything I can. But also, you can also join, our slack.loft.sh, and you can join the vCluster channel if you have questions. All right, so let's go ahead and create that virtual cluster. It's gonna take a minute, for it to come up. Not very long, but while that's happening, let's go ahead and look at users. So users is how you're gonna do like user configuration and setup, and you can also set up like OIDC and stuff like that. So you can auth using other stuff, right? Like maybe you've got Active Directory or something like that, and you want to auth using that. You can do that as well, or you can manage your users locally within here if you want. Like you don't want to connect it in yet, you're just doing a POC to give a couple of users access. You can do that. You got users, teams, and you've got different roles that you can configure here depending on what you want to set up. All right, let me make sure I've got everything so far that I've usually cover. Projects, show the integrations. Cool. Let's go back to the virtual cluster, and we'll give it a minute to make sure it's running. All right, still waiting to start. But if you check out here, you can actually see how long this has been sleeping for. So this is super helpful for billing or users, just kind of created this. And then 5 hours from now, if it hasn't been used, 5 hours is a bit much, right? Like you probably want to set it up more like, an hour, maybe 30 minutes of inactivity, have it go to sleep and then scale stuff down. But it'll also show you when it was last active, which is super helpful for billing and teams that want to figure out, hey, am I asking for too much and I'm not actually using it to reduce cost there, right? But otherwise, if you just want to give them free reign, it's like on-prem and they can just have as many as they want. You don't have to set up these limits or anything like that. They can just do whatever they want. So if you notice, these quotas right here are for isolated templates. I actually did not set up a one for the regular one, which I can modify later. But let's go ahead and drill down into this virtual cluster, right? So I just launched it using a template. You can see what's running, in the namespace, pods, deployments. I don't have anything actually running on this. It's just a virtual cluster that's running. What I can do now is let's check out Argo real quick. Right now I've got just a basic, my local cluster running in Argo CD. If I go over here and actually add to Argo CD, then I'll be able to see, let's go to settings, go to clusters there. Now to target, right? So now I can actually deploy to this using Argo CD if I wanted to, which is super easy to get it added that way, right? Like you can automate it if you want to. You don't have to actually go in and hit that toggle. Pretty awesome. You can also go to the Argo CD section by clicking this right here. It'll take you to the same spot, right? So it kind of gives you that little built-in here if users want to access it. You can also modify stuff over here and add in different links and information that you want. Right now we just got virtual clusters, namespaces, dev environments, and stuff like that. Some of this stuff is, maybe some future stuff. If you want to see the demo for like the dev pod stuff, chat with sales, right? You can just deploy this and you can get access and ask them. All right, let's see, what else can we show off? Okay, yeah, let's go to the command line actually. So there's also a command line for vCluster. So you can do like vCluster list. And right now I'm off to the platform. I can interact with my virtual clusters here. There's a bunch of different commands that I can use for vCluster, right? Like vCluster login, I can delete, I can create, I can do all that cool stuff, right? And like I said, all this stuff is running within the base Kubernetes cluster. So like it's all CRDs and stuff like that. And if I get namespaces, I've got vCluster platform running here, and then I've got the actual stuff running here. Let's keg it all here. See stuff running here, right? So you got the stateful set for the virtual cluster. You've got some services, kubedns, everything running, right? So that's how you can kind of see it during, on the command line. So like I said, this is running commands directly on the host cluster. So you can see everything there still. So if you've got monitoring, you've got users or you've got your platform team that's actually watching stuff here, they're going to be able to interact with it on the host cluster, right? They're going to be able to see everything running, be able to interact with it there. Let's see what else can I show? I usually show like ingress stuff like that too. Let me bring up the YAML stuff that I have for our examples. So basically after, kind of showing off what you can do or what it looks like within the vCluster platform, what I say next is usually, head over to our docs, check out, the OSS version. So you're gonna go to vCluster docs and you're gonna start out here and it's gonna say, what are virtual clusters? Go down here to the vCluster section, and this is gonna be the OSS stuff. Check it out. What you can do is go ahead and deploy a virtual cluster. Get used to using it. Your first deployment is gonna, just port forward and you're gonna access it that way, which may not be super helpful if you're trying to give access to users and stuff like that. So what you're going to do after that is you're actually going to want to go in and you're going to want to do stuff with this YAML, right? So this is just kind of like a basic default vCluster YAML, right? Like I'm saying in the control plane, I want to have ingress set up, and this is the host name I want to actually access it through. And then you can set up the proxy and extra sans information. And then what this is going to do is allow you to access it on that host name. And then the sync stuff is actually going to sync stuff within the virtual cluster, right? So if I go sync, from host ingress classes, whenever that virtual cluster comes up and I do kubectl get ingress classes, it's going to show me what ingress class is on the host cluster. And then I can use that when I'm at my ingress resource. And then to host ingresses, what this is going to do is it's going to automatically sync stuff that's created in the virtual cluster to the host cluster. So if you create an ingress within there for your application, it's going to sync it to the host cluster. That way the host cluster's load balancer and ingress controller can be used by users within their virtual cluster without having to deploy a new ingress controller in every virtual cluster, right? Well, that can get super expensive, right? If you have a load balancer per virtual cluster, very expensive. And then after that, so after you've got everything running and you're able to get your virtual cluster running with your application and get ingress and everything configured, access it, everything's running how you want. You've got some of the CRDs running there that you want access to, maybe some storage or something like that. Then I'd say come over to vCluster platform. And then what you would want to do is install, vCluster platform, just running this, and then you'll get a 14-day trial. And on that trial, you're gonna have access to everything. So you'll be able to access everything. You'll be able to configure different things and do a POC. But like I said, you want to make sure that your virtual clusters are running, because then you're going to want to be able to set up your templates and use your vCluster YAML that you're using previously and import that into the templates. And then that way, once your users come in, they can just go ahead and deploy something. You've got all your ingress stuff configured and figured out. You've got all your storage and stuff figured out, and then you'll be good to go, right? You can do this on the same cluster, right? If you start with vCluster OSS, you can end up installing vCluster platform on the same cluster, right? So if you've got Nginx running, and you've got like MetaLB or something like that, and you've got your load balancer stuff going, you'll be good to go. But that's pretty much what I show off on the demos, minus questions and minus some of the slides and everything. That's just a quick stream. If you want me to do another stream and show off other types of demos, and you want to come in for some questions and answers, let me know. Try to stream here a little bit more. Oh yeah, I'll be at KubeCon next week, so if you're going to KubeCon, you can come see us at the booth. I'll be there. And then after that, we should have another demo coming, so you can sign up for the demo there. I'll put some helpful links and stuff into this stream that you can watch later. But thanks for watching this, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye.